know that it's okay to speak up and say, whoa, wait a minute, let's stop for a minute and catch up. So our goals tonight are to develop an understanding of how we're going to be structured moving forward. We've got a lot of tasks that need to happen over the next few months, and so how we're going to get that work done. So we're going to focus on that. You'll hear more about a proposal using subcommittees. There was a subcommittee meeting related to communications. We know that there's some urgent things we need to just really get started with. And Mark's going to run through what we did at that meeting, and so we can get your feedback on that. We've got a draft calendar that we want to start thinking about and start really pinning down some milestones of what we definitely need to get done by what date. And then there's some places where there's a lot of vague questions that Mike's helping us answer based on state feedback. So Mike's going to help us with the calendar piece and the range of options that we have. You know, at some point we need to say, yes, we are going for an accelerated merger. When does that decision need to be made? And what happens after that? And then the end of the meeting, I hope we'll be able to have some differentiation among ourselves about subcommittees where we have a primary home and places where you want to have secondary input, perhaps, but that you at least feel confident that you have a place where you're going to put some of your major energy, because there's no way we can get all of this done if we don't do tasks in between meetings and draw on your areas of interest so that you can really feel good about what you're doing. Any questions about a proposed agenda? Anything we should add?
I have one, maybe you thought about it and decided not to add it, but at our strategy committee, and then again 2 weeks ago, we mentioned that I say highly likely that we want to hire a third party to do a facilities review.
Okay, we'll talk about that. So
what the reason I'm just wondering why it's not specifically on the agenda is I don't even know if this body can commit funds.
I had it on the agenda and then I took it off, but I'm just going to make a note so that we be sure that we talk about that. But we will. It's in. So why don't we just jump into a review of the agenda? So the number one is proposed structure for our meetings. We're going to review some key points. What did we do last time? Reports, any formal actions that happened, any reports from subcommittees. C, actions, and the actions are on the second page of this particular document. And so these are just thoughts about what some actions might be. And so that question about do we need to hire somebody and so forth, I see is possibly coming in under number 8.
How about adjustments to the agenda? I was just asking.
Nope, that's good. And then D, back to the review of proposed structure of the meetings, we have some talking points. What can we leave the meeting saying that we've got 1, 2, 3 to talk about, or tasks. Other things, so Jean, don't let us forget that in number 8. Other things that we might want to add to the agenda? We can revisit that. Do you guys want to go around the room again and say where you are? Do you feel like you know everybody? Okay. Get up and move and get food and so forth. So let's reports. This is just an FYI. Things that we needed to do was submit a letter to the secretary. That's done. Check that off. And progress on grant application. Elaine,
It's been submitted. And I've had a couple of emails with Brad James, who I think is the person who will approve it. And there's nothing in those emails that leads me to believe that we won't be approved for them. So there were like specific little things like what about this particular maybe detail on how we talk about or something. But yeah, so I'm guessing we're gonna get that. And then there's also a contract with the USDA that our last meeting wasn't really clear about. So the grant comes from the AOE, but we contract with the VSBA, and they coordinate all of the resources, including Mike and DNC Financial Resources. We also have money in our budget for legal work, but I understand that even some of that, they're gonna do at the state level in the form of like white papers around particular topics. Questions?
This was the 20K grant, right?
Right.
Mike, anything that we should know about for formal action since the last? I don't think our study committee did any.
No.
So, use of subcommittees, this will be quick unless, we need to go into lengthy discussion here. Just talking to other people, so my proposal, to put it out there, is to divide us into teams of 3 different groups. One focused on communications, one governance, one financial. It doesn't mean that if your primary assignment is in financial, that you're not gonna be doing communications, because I think what's gonna happen is we're all gonna need to work across those disciplines. We can't do the work without doing that, but just making sure people have a primary home. We also have Kelly secured for us.
Oh. St. George Town Hall, so it's every Wednesday morning for an 8 o'clock meeting from now until we decide we don't need it anymore.
It's a great spot,
Yeah.
right next to the gas station.
Have your coffee, yeah.
Going over, chairs are
Easy to easy,
comfy,
eating on,
it's
off,
right-
Harvey,
Wi-Fi,
Cinch.
parking, easy, no traffic.
So depending on the tasks that we assign ourselves, by the time we leave at the end of a meeting, that facility is going to be available for us every 8 o'clock Wednesday, every Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock.
Yes.
Thank you, Kelly. Kelly has the keys. Your thoughts on subcommittee structure? I've talked with a few of you about it more closely than others, but how do you feel about that?
Well, I think it became clear just in our first meeting that committees are going to be broken down even further, that there's things, so we're all going to be busy. We're all going to be on multiple committees / subcommittee / subcommittees. The amount of work is done.
Just speak to what you think the governance committee would be charged with.
Yes, so one of the things that we need to do, for example, is come up, and it's got to be in what goes to the agency of ed for them to react to, and then it's got to be part of our report to the state board of ed. We need to have a plan for representation on the committee. So what does that look like? So the articles, for example. We also need to have a transition plan in place, moving from our current board structure to a single board. What does that look like? So I see the governance just working on some of the language to it. Keith Roberts has expressed interest in, and I know Mark has talked about this as well, get our attorneys involved with some of the language that needs to be written to
On the articles.
yeah. And so, they might do some work, come up with an early draft, bring it back to the full study committee for reaction, feedback, and then go and, their group work through the nuts and bolts of it. One of the survey that I sent to you, and I didn't share this model with everybody, I'll send it at the end of today, but I did a sort of your primary interests. And so, for example, if there's a topic, the role of local fundraising, for example, there are a number of you who said, yes, I really want to work on this. Most of you said, no, it's not a good use of my time. So local fundraising rules, whatever those might be, what happens with that, and it might be a matter of one meeting, it might not be extensive, it might be a matter of half an hour sitting down and figuring out what do we do now, what would it look like in the future, but we need to answer that question. question that comes up in communities. So I have Eric, Keith, Tim, Kelly, Karen, Jean, and Bob as an administrator would provide input to that. But those people have said, yes, that question is important to me. So if there's a subcommittee task, that's what they're gonna work on their agenda, those are the people who said that they want to work on that. Social media, we're gonna talk more about that tonight. There are a few people who said that they have an interest in social media. So Mark, Dave, Kelly, Kevin, Colleen have said that, when it comes to the interface pieces using social media and so forth, we're willing to think through some of the things that need to be worked on and want to have some input to that. And Dave, we haven't talked in a week or so, but you're still good with that.
Yeah, sure.
So that's another
You should have
example
just
where.
texted me. I
I know, waste the time. So that Mark's gonna go through some of the suggested strategies, and as Mark noted, becomes clear that we need to disperse and be task focused.
You wrote authority on the agenda. Would you want to speak to that? Under subcommittees?
Yeah, and Mike's gonna help with this. So we had an agenda planning meeting last week, and we talked about the subcommittee structure. And one of the things we talked about was, and let's use the finance questions, so we want to know what a model looks like. So do we charge a committee to go out and hire a consultant? Or we don't necessarily want people to just go off and do whatever. We've got to funnel things through certain channels. And so, and yet at the same time, people are going to need to know that what they can do and what they can't do. So.
And the body of work really, for a subcommittee falls into two general areas, I would think. One is sort of the architect and design and make recommendations back to this group to take action on. Or maybe some things the full committee is comfortable charging the subcommittee to actually do. So think about the contrast with architects, the builders, go ahead and take care of that function, go ahead and do that in detail. So it just may be handy as we get the subcommittees going to just have the subcommittees perhaps craft a charge that this full committee would approve or recognize, and that way we're all recognizing the role of one another and not say duplicating work that can be avoided. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
And so a goal, for example, might be by the time we leave today, each of the subcommittees has a charge of tasks that they can work on prior to the next meeting, so that when we convene again, we're coming in, reviewing the work that has been done, responding to it, and so forth.
We just put it differently, the powers of the subcommittee and the powers of the full committee. Maybe that's a different way to think of it.
For instance, like the communications committee put the plan together, but maybe or maybe not have the authority to respond to the free press.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
There's something you might want to figure out.
Mhm. Very good. So I don't have anything else in the subcommittee structure. I think, we'll hit on that again before we leave tonight. Ready to go forward? You wanna add? Communications recommendations, Mark, do you want to walk us through that? We had a meeting.
We had a meeting on Wednesday. Lot I. Colleen provided a summary on the back of the agenda, also a strategies, I'll call it a strategies memo, but a strategies table of things we discussed. Colleen, Jean, Kelly, Kevin, Dave, were all on subcommittee for communications. It was our first meeting. I think we talked about a lot, and actually, as you see from Colleen's summary, came to other conclusions outside of our committee about how operations in general, about how much there is to do and how subcommittees overlap, communications dealing with governance, or governance dealing with financial, how it's all gonna mesh together, and things we need to think about, but, I'm now just rambling. So,
And I just say, these, I took notes,
yeah.
but this was a Google Doc that we all have
Yeah.
to.
First up, review the table of strategies. This is a table that we put together among all of us that talks about certain ways that we're going to get our story out and to start communicating with various groups that need to know what's going on. So starting, and I'm not going to read this verbatim, you all have copies, but hitting some highlights. Board meetings, obviously this is going to get talked about at each one of the local board meetings. And one thing that came to light is there's not a CBU members, CBU board members aren't part of this committee and are going to want to know what's going on. So if we could do that at the first part of our local board meetings, our CBU members could sit in and then go talk to their CBU board meeting. And that way everybody stays informed at the same level, or at least we hope so. And again, anybody has questions or wants to jump in should do so. And just quickly going through some other stuff. Board chair meetings, we didn't want that to be a subset of this committee. Having board chairs together, we get together once a month. So those at board chair meetings, as far as this committee is concerned, the only thing that would get talked about is logistics. There'll be no other planning, no other discussion outside us in the hallway, talking about it as we will all do. Talking about local newspapers. We all have newspapers in our town, they're all important. It's, voters, I think a lot of people, when it gets to voting time for something like this, or the budgets, they read the headlines. And what we want to have in there and what kind of articles we want to write for them. And we'll come back to this when we talk about frequently asked questions. The faculty and staff, this is a subgroup in our buildings that are going to have a lot of questions about this. And I think they're as well informed as the general public, or we are, which is they have a lot of questions. We're going to have a lot of questions. And talking about how we're going to get information to them, because we sort of felt that they're an excellent disseminator of information in the classrooms, in the talking to parents. And we want them to be saying the right things or have the facts in their hands. We talked about disseminating a survey to the staff, sort of just getting a feeling of what their questions are, what we can help them with as we go along. What information can we give to them that they think they are? The study committee meetings, we talked about these are open meetings. We actually talked about this a lot among ourselves last time. Focus forums. We talked about, we have to have a public forum. Each town has to have its own public forum. When we're going to have it, can we combine it? Should we combine it with our budget forums? In Charlotte, the budget forum ends up being the board and 3 other people. Is that appropriate? We have to make sure that it's yeah, exactly. Well publicized, and before public forums happen, if we're talking about doing it at budget time, is that enough time for us to have all our information together? Have we done any prep work that will help those go forward, like frequently asked question sheets, which we're going to do. Op-eds. We discussed not having op-eds from us. So we're separating op-eds from informational articles. Op-eds, after we've come to our conclusions that we're going to take a vote or not take a vote in May or June, wherever that's going to be, that's one thing. But right now, and up to that point, we should stay out of the newspaper op-ed page. That doesn't mean it's not going to come from somebody else. But that's a little. Social media. This is a big topic, and how much use is it getting information out in our communities? And I think we'll look for some more feedback from you guys, whether that's useful, it's work, it's a lot of work, that's another piece of work that we need to take care of. I'll keep my opinions on that until we get to see. And then frequently asked question sheets, which are kind of more on the summary communication sheet over here. We had talked about how useful they are, FAQs, in getting information to people, whether they're as articles and papers, whether they're one-page handouts at the forum. Colleen has started to put together some questions that we should add on to every time somebody asks us a question that seems reasonable. And we should get answers and be able to, we're not all gonna have every piece of information in our head about this all the time. But if we have some sheets that we can hand out or have articles in paper or have something we can post on Front Porch Forum a little bit at a time, that are uniform and factual. I think I kind of, and so the last thing I'll talk about as far as the recommendations is detailing our calendar from now to May and making sure we stick to it is going to be a big thing, and it's something we talked about just as far as having planning for our meetings on a regular basis. Whether we feel we need one or not, we should probably get together every week because there's going to be something to do, whether we think it's going to happen or not. That's my brief summary of our meeting, and yes.
The last strategy guide was meeting with select boards.
Yeah, so they're influencers in our communities, and I've had a lot of them. I've had a lot of our select board members have made up their minds about this already, but they'll, if they have the actual facts, I'm not saying anyone's going to change their mind, but people we can talk to who haven't made up their mind or are open to listening. It's just, I think it makes sense. They have
Well, there are
a voice,
other
they have
elected
a big
officials in
voice.
our towns, so, I think it's an important voice to.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say they're all going to be on our side, whichever way we decide. Having them informed along the way will go a long way to smoothing the process. I think.
I kind of think, there's gonna be a lot of detail that people are gonna want over time.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, the first issue would be to not allow people to frame it as a no vote is like, no, I don't like Act 46.
Yeah.
So I think that's where people feel, there, a lot of people, the first reaction is, I don't like this law. If I just vote no, it's protest against the law rather than, those really are, our choice isn't to say no, we're not involved, our choice is to do it or stay in the 2 years until they merge
inform
us.
us a different way. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a natural reaction, right? It's the will to change, no matter what that change is sometimes. So you're right. I think that's
And if we don't tell the story, somebody's going to tell it. I think when we met as a subcommittee, we started feeling a lot of urgency about what needs to get done, just because of that point.
So to your point, Eric, that's one thing that I think why we have to be kind of thoughtful on these FAQs, because I would not put it that way in my community that it's going to happen. So you have to vote yes, So we just have to be really careful.
Yes, but
I mean, yeah, there's nothing that says it's going to absolutely happen. So, I'm just saying that I don't want to get into that. It's just that that's some of the kind of things that we're really careful of when we put the FAQs together, is that we are really good balance.
But if we do something early enough where we're still in the formative stage of what are we going to propose, then the first community sessions are really about collecting what people's questions are, what your concerns are, so that we can help,
Sure, but I think even before that happens, Derek's point is some sort of article or an FAQ in the newspaper saying Act 46, what is it? Make sure that whether there's going to be a lot of people who say no, then we'll never change it, right? But there are a lot of people who are going to say no because they think they have other options or something. and just informing them along the way.
Because
Good.
one of the great things though is that we all live in 5 different towns and we have 5 different local papers.
Yep.
We don't have to write 5 articles.
Oh, no, we just have to write one
article.
That's why these FAQs are so.
But we can write the one article and then distribute on Front Porch Forum the link to that article so that, and then whenever anybody asks a question, you're like, that's a great question. Here's the answer, but also go to this, so that you can always have that. And that whenever people say, I don't know about this, we're like, well, we're sorry about that, but 2 months ago we wrote this, and I agree with it. The sooner we get something out there that's short and a few sentences, is better. And I know you're doing great work, that's not what I'm saying.
I'm gonna say the days
Well,
of
and
Terry.
Terry,
Oh, did you wanna?
no, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add too, because we discussed our role is to really be the information. We don't want to engage in the street fight, because as people start getting more information, the enticing language is going to come and the miscommunications are going to come, but as long as this body keeps its story straight, so to speak, from a factual basis with that kind of information, we can do what we are tasked to do, which is consider it. And let the arguments and the debate take place outside as much as we can without our engagement in that process.
I guess I would just say that I think for some people, the debate's gonna be about the law. And we have to direct it to the law, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever your position on it is, the law, and we just have to deal with it. And come up with our response to it in terms of the options that we have under the law.
So one of the subcommittees of the subcommittee, social media, so, we had a discussion about, as they suggested, that everything gets funneled to one location and out, so that we're not creating 5 different stories, 7 different stories, that everything comes into a central portal. And Kim's gonna help lead some of the charge on this with us, so that we direct people to one place, and then the content. So with communications, we've got the technical pieces, how do we funnel people to a central portal? And then we also have the content development. So depending on where people are spending their time, they may be charged with developing content. We may want Russ to write a short piece related to tax implications, whatever. I'm just pulling something.
As long as it's not social media.
And then you can give that to Kevin, and we can make sure that, it goes in the right places. So that we'll be collaborating in those kinds of ways. Mark, did you want to talk about the public forums?
Sure.
We talked about the pros and cons of using the budget.
The budget meeting, I know, and, well, I'll throw it out there. It is one more meeting among 100 that we have going on between now and March. But I don't know, part of me is throw them both together, publicize it. People that want to come will come. And the other part of me is separate them. The budget meeting is the budget meeting. That's, people don't come to that. People may come if they know it's just about Act 46. It's just or making 2 separate meetings on the same night. I don't know, but
So what,
again,
yeah,
it's a disseminating tool. It's also required under the law. This is just that we have to jump through.
So ours and Williston are early, right? So, November, meeting forms, I think, one thought is we could have, the 2 we're doing with the schools
Yep.
is collecting what teachers' concerns are, which is, I think, what the budget, I've never been, the budget pieces, and then the community one could be similar, but we could also have a frequently asked questions document that we may, or a short summary, the first pass of a short summary of it, be something that we start to get out. I like combining them, it might help get more people engaged in the budget process too. I don't know.
so one of the things that we want to do tonight is leave the meeting with a recommendation from all of us, hopefully come to consensus that yes, we want to piggyback the two forums together. No, we want to differentiate and have separate days. And so I think it's helpful if we can all just put our pros and cons on the table, because there definitely are pros and cons, and ask our administrators to weigh in on it too.
I think if you have a separate budget forum, you could end up holding two Act 46 forums. And people show up at the budget forum and start asking questions, and you can't very well say, well, come to, we're having an Act 46 forum in 3 weeks, please come to that instead, and we'll answer all your questions there.
Yep.
So, that may sort of get determined for you. So if that's out there, I guess for me, that sort of leans towards having, one on the same night.
And clearly articulate times.
Yeah, I mean, could you hold, at least you could say, could you hold that question? We're gonna get to that as the second part of our agenda.
I mean, we've done that. I mean, we did that last spring. We did that twice, where we had a budget forum and we had a bond forum, and they were clearly delineated. I don't really feel like there were a lot of people that were asking the wrong questions at the wrong time. And, as an observation, I think it draws other people into the other process.
So you say you had them as separate meetings?
No, we had them as one meeting.
Yes.
But separate, separate agenda items. And, folks who didn't know anything about the budget process showed up and had to sit through it and things like that.
I think it's appropriate to keep them together. Because Act 46 really is driven out of the desire to control school budgets. So as, the people who are managing the school budget, this is what's on our radar now. There's a study committee to look at consolidation, and that's part of it. So I think it makes a lot of sense to keep them together.
I tend to agree with that. Can we discuss whether, the other part of this is, we know that those budget forums are all on separate evenings, and we have, everybody can be there.
Yeah, I was just looking over the schedule, and they vary from November 10th through December 1st. So logistically speaking, we may want to be thinking about our messaging during that time period, because questions and communities going in early to come out with opinions.
Who has the first meeting?
We do, Wilson.
And we, one of the things we did have talked about is that we don't want the local Act 46 discussion to be led only by local boards. So if we could have, we talked about ensuring that there's a posse, that there's crossover, so that Williston is at Heinsberg and Shelburne is at Charlotte and so forth, so that we hear each other's voices. And Kelly, you had the idea about at every meeting that there's something for people to write on. And that we can
The
do
card, questions you still they didn't get answered, or your concerns, what are you concerned about? I remember the conversation about crossing each other's borders. I'm okay with listening. I'm a little concerned about having someone who's not a Williston resident presenting at the Williston one. So.
Oh, for Act 46.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So, but I can see the value in observing, I guess. But I wouldn't want all of us to show up at Charlotte.
Yeah, let's keep talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I thought, well, in the spirit of that, I thought it was just so that not to overtake a meeting or overpower a meeting, but more or less just to show that there is a committee of peers, not just Williston. So in that way.
I get what you mean, Libby. That would fly.
We do have, our committees are very similar, but they're not the same.
No.
And they do have all sorts of personalities, and their elected representatives ought to be the ones, in my opinion, bringing that to the.
Yeah.
Actually, so does that mean that it's, because you're talking about maybe having some other people come in and not speak, observe, would it be presented by, so here are the members of the Charlotte board who are on the committee? Are the other, is it all 5 of those Charlotte board members who are presenting on Act 46? Is it just Mark and I plus a couple people from this group?
I mean, I would say that any community could certainly invite someone else, like if you really wanted, but Dave was great at communicating something in particular, you could certainly invite him to speak at your meeting. But, I mean, I don't wanna say you can't do it, I'm just saying I should.
No, but I get your question. Yeah, it's gonna be media.
So it's not,
Yeah, I mean, I think the other board members will be there to support us.
Right.
And just
Okay.
exactly what you said, but in general.
Jean, did you have something else?
No.
Think about CBU role too, in some of this too. So Williston has a meeting, Act 46 budget, K-8 budget, same night, well publicized Act 46 meeting, starting at, budget at 5:30, Act 46 at 7, whatever. You just, so we would want also to have some CBU rep, so we can at least.
Well, and that'll be something. Yeah, if we have our local meetings in the fall, I mean, as usual, there will be much more attention paid to this in April and May, it's coming down to the wire. We could then discuss having a district-wide meeting at CBU.
But don't you think in the initial phase, it's just to kind of inform people that this committee is in session, and this is what we're doing? But I don't think there's gonna be probably, at that point, a lot of detail to share, just say, this is what the state has created, and this is what we're doing to address it. More to come.
I'm hearing that there is some support for using our calendars efficiently to have it on the same evening. Is there anyone who feels strongly otherwise? Administrators, do you want to weigh in, or are we not going down the wrong?
No, I just think it's important to delineate, here's when we're doing the budget meeting, here's when we're doing the Act 60 at 46.
So we'll get 3 people at one and 4 at another. All right, can we move on?
Please.
But just to clarify, that means, so are we the Williston board taking care of Williston's and then, or do we need to make sure we have?
So we have a subcommittee of people, subcommittee of the subcommittee, who have expressed a strong interest in public forums. And I see that group getting together and saying, okay, what's our agenda? What's our common agenda that everybody might share so that the messaging is consistent?
Because like
So
Tim just
nobody
said,
needs
that's
to reinvent the wheel.
right, that's sort of that first meeting is, this is out there, and this is what this is.
Right, it's just,
Yeah.
well, all I'm suggesting is that if ours is November 10th in Williston, that we're now less than a month away, so do we have time, is the decision that, the first meeting is just really the local people handle the first meeting because it's fact collecting and maybe getting their.
So before we leave tonight, one of the things that we'll do is we'll charge the group to come up with a structure and for the public forums and take that next step. So we'll do that. So if we forget to come back to it, make sure that we hit that. Because there is some urgency there. We need to publicize it and get that word out.
If you're using your budget meetings for shared purpose, would it make sense to add CVU to the mix? This is one more audience. I know that CVU per se as a community is not voting as a community. I recognize that. Is it one more opportunity to get your message out there?
Don't we typically have CVU at our budget? We did, they present.
They present as a separate agenda, I think.
Yeah.
But usually in February, I don't think we do anything.
Here's what it's a little bit tricky, we have 2 CB members around this table, and they're both in Williston. So they would be you'd be asking the 2 of them or for them to select going to 4 other meetings.
But I guess my point is that we haven't historically done anything in November as a public forum for CBU.
Right.
So you could certainly, I think you would invite the board members, and expect them to be there, frankly, but that is.
You might be able to get a couple people from this committee to join you at a CBU. Would you do a forum in December?
No, we don't do anything, we don't do it at all. Oh. People don't come.
And I think if you're looking for CVU members at the local forum, the K-8 forums, you'd be looking for the 2 members that are here who are informed about,
Okay.
right, they're the committee
Or
members.
we'll just make sure that we write very clear CBU FAQs, so.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Let's not use that one, that's a good one. We'll need to revisit that.
Still very good.
This might be a good time to, go over the draft calendar, perhaps. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Mark, this is going to be useful, if your committee members, these materials that were distributed last meeting, simple fact sheets, drawn straight from the AOB website, accompanied by some fundamental 5-year data trends, both in student data, teacher data, as well as financial data for school districts. Just a packet of background information for general purposes. There might be some gems in there.
You got it.
Thanks. You got it. The calendar.
What, probably the models first, right?
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah, I guess so. Lots of stuff. So here's that first meeting we had, there was a lot of stuff tossed at you in the PowerPoint, the general PowerPoint presentation and for general purposes. It seemed prudent tonight to sort of get hay down the ponies and really be sure that we're talking about what your options are. So it sort of narrows your set considerably. The parallel you might want to think about is that of Chittenden East in terms of what their objective was and what their outcome was. Although that was pre-Act 46, the conditions are really quite the same with respect to all of Chittenden East members participating in a Union High School district, not unlike yours. So page 1 of Writing Corners to 1, this is simply if you would take the affirmative action of going out, like included in this committee, when the unified union made sense, this is what will be required for a unified union. All 5 of your K districts, pre-K-12 districts, have to vote yes. It's a plus mark star. The result is a unified union with 1 district, 1 board, 1 budget. And you no longer need a supervisory union. You need a superintendent's office, you just don't need a supervisory union structure. And again, the timing of this is what plays out with the incentives. If you were able to accomplish this, the successful votes in all 5 of your communities by June 30th of 2016, then you're on the 5-year track for incentives. If it's thereafter, you're on the 4-year track. If it's going to be accelerated, you'll also have to be operational by July 1st, 2017. Down below, and trying the conventional timeline, operational by July 1st, 2019.
It's operational as we are today, at least.
That's right. That's right. So that is really your option. I mean, that is the option. Page 2 goes into a what-if scenario. Having gone out to all 5 communities, and if a majority of those communities voted yes, not all, then the result is modified union school district, modified union school district. So in this example, you've got on page 2 of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got front and back. Clever, Sandy. Clever. I got you. In this example, you've got 1 community that voted no, but you still yield a majority of your 5 having voted yes. So you end up with 2 districts. One is a district of those 4 former elementary districts plus CVU. Your outlier district is the one who voted no. So you still end up with a supervisory union with 2 members. You still end up with 2 school districts. You've got 2 boards plus a commercial SU board. You've got 2 budgets plus your SU budget. But this reduces what you've got to, again, the equivalent of what is in place in Chittenden East.
Can I ask a question on this one?
Yes, you certainly may.
So on this one, let's just pick Williston. Williston voted no.
Okay.
Then on the SU board, Williston has about 1/3 of the students in the existing SU. So there would be a supervisory union board of which there'd be some makeup where Williston would have roughly 1/3 of the members on the supervisory union board.
Actually, half.
Or would have, right?
Yeah.
That seems
This
strange.
has been tested and sung by the Supremes a couple of times. Supreme Court has ruled that it is lawful to, regardless of size and magnitude, for the member districts of the issue board have 3 reps on that board. So the great big district would have 3 members, the little district, Wilson, whomever E is, would have 3 members. So,
And with like special ed and transportation and all that stuff still have to exist at the SU because that's state.
Correct. That's correct.
That's-
So what's key in this example is that all 5 committees have to go to vote. Okay, it's not an opportunity for anyone to say, no, we're not going to go to vote. If it's your conclusion that unified union makes sense, then that's the objective, is to go for unified union, and if all 5 vote yes, you got patient. If majority vote yes, for example, 4 of the 5, this is what the result will be.
Is there a chance for a rework if that, you know, because, yeah, as Gene says, that would really be messy.
it would
Or
look like
when, one didn't.
Well, if we hold a vote, one community says no, and this arrangement on page 2, is it required that that's what we do? Or can
So-
we kick out and say, well, thank you very much for playing? You know, the other 3 or 4 towns could say, well, we'll, go ahead without them.
Great question. The short answer is no, that's not the power of a school district to do that. The change to a supervisory union boundary, which is what you're describing, moving a town in or moving a town out of the issue structure, remains even under Act 46, the province of the State Board of Education. So that is the body that can make that happen. And in this example, this outlier district, whoever it is, I didn't name it as Wilson, in a case example, it could be. That would be an interesting time for that district as the clock ticks to 2019, because that district becomes quite rapidly on the target of the commissioner or the secretary in the state board in terms of what to do with that district. But the power to alter your world accordingly because of the vote, no, that wouldn't be a local power that you would have.
So Williston, in our example, votes no, they're E in this box.
Okay.
And say they're a target of the State Board of Ed for 2019.
But they have more than 900 students. Does that make a difference?
It doesn't actually, and the reason it doesn't is because of Williston's association right now with the union high school.
So the State Board could say, well, too bad, Williston, your 3 or 4 years as E no longer count, and they stuff them into
Yes,
this regardless of whether or not they voted.
that could be an option, yes.
Or someplace else.
Or leave it there.
But I mean, if in the interim, their kids were still going to CBU.
They're still part of the high school.
Tuition.
But I
No,
understand,
it'd be the-
No, not tuition.
Same as today. It says.
I'm pretty sure I heard John Albertini say that in their newly formed SU, that all of the board members, the SU district board, every single one of them is a member of the SU board. And then they add in a few more from Huntington. So they
Well,
have,
then, so you could have, you could have an 8-member board, right? One from
Right.
each existing town plus 4 from
Right.
Williston. That would still be 50%.
that's not what they have.
Oh, we have to be 3 though, you're right.
You know what I mean, they have, I think they have did you tell me, do you remember this one? When you had that training? So let's say they have a 12-member board,
Full member issue board,
SD board,
Right.
SD board.
SD board,
Yeah,
and the SU board is 14. 12 of the, so there's a 1-to-1 overlap between the SD and SU plus the 2 from Huntington. So
I'll
that
check on
doesn't
I'll check
square
on
with what you
It's
were saying, but
complicated
I
by
thought
the
that's
fact
what
that
you
in this
said.
case, Williston is
Huge,
32% of the,
Yeah.
of the entity, and in their case, it's Huntington. And they have a lot of small players, they don't have.
Right.
But I'll tell you that every time Elaine and I ask a question and how it actually plays out in Huntington, we're surprised where it landed, and it is confusing for anybody on the outside to understand it quickly. Because they're trying to preserve everything that Huntington had before as being a member of the Mount Mansfield Union, when no one else is just a member of the Mount Mansfield Union, and then creating all the architecture around modified. It's nightmarish.
The acronym is MUD.
Clear
There's a
as.
reason.
Sure.
So the other thing, just to make this really complicated, is that St. George's tuitions to CE. so they could, they'd be in a different situation than this.
St. George is not a member of CSSU?
No.
Correct.
So that needs to get fixed in the articles of agreement though.
Right.
Because we can't have tuition and operating under one umbrella.
So, and I have a question too, as we talk about these, and maybe this is a conversation for you and I more directly, but when you say like, if we come to a vote as a community and when we look at these structures and then perhaps Shelburne is out, right? And then all of a sudden the state will come in and say, well, no, but you're gonna be part of this district. What district? Like when you sent me that, about these non-sending schools
Right.
wanting to form a district for the whole
Statewide,
state,
yes.
scared me.
Right.
Like, what does that mean? That I would be a bigger, my kids would be with that district, but I would still go to CVU, or would this
You'd
now
just be 100% tuition.
anywhere?
Right.
So, but are these all sort of manifestations of maybes?
No, actually, the St. George situation is much more complicated than Williston says no or somebody else says no, because we can't both have a structure that has operating districts and you're either all tuition or you're all operating. So in the articles of agreement, that's why it's so important, we're sitting here with an agreement, we would be anticipating what a yes vote from the St. George community would mean like you're under the umbrella with everybody and you lose the right to tuition. You would be part of the district. Or you're out, and that would be a case where I would imagine the state board would be looking for another home for you because we can't both operate and tuition. Every single member within the new entity that's formed has to either be all operating or all tuition.
Were St. George students elected to high school?
Mostly students.
They have an agreement
Most.
for a number of years to send their K schools to Williston exclusively, and they can tuition to any high school they want.
And the majority choose CVU?
Yeah, all but two
It is a K-6 agreement or a K-8?
K agreement. Complicated because of that question.
So it sounds like we're talking more about choice and St. George, but what's important to understand is there's two choice conversations in play. One is choice as you know it now, and the other is elective choice within regional compacts. Where high school students, another high school, the opportunity to exchange some quantum of students, often not more than 10 per grade. that sort of thing.
Right.
So that's a secondary way for families and students exercise choice. So I wish there was different nomenclature for it. But it's just two ways to get needs met, I guess. Is what I think of it.
And so then to that example, then either we all become operating or St. George tuitioning.
We're not gonna become tuition.
No, but if St. George decides and elects to stay tuitioning, right, would we have to then look outside CSSU? Is that what that means? Is that what the state?
The state might put districts.
We're gonna find out, perhaps in short order, depending on what happens in Westford, because they're in a similar situation. And they're voting in November.
Except that Westford doesn't have K choice.
Well, neither does.
No,
Neither
neither
does
does-
St. George
well,
right now. We have a
well-
contract. Well, we do, right? Because we choose to have that contract.
Right in the middle. They don't not have K choice because they're part of a K union school. They don't have K choice because they've signed an agreement with Williston to be their K-8 school of choice.
But they're not even.
But they're not in a union setting pre-K-8.
Does that agreement get renewed with some frequency?
10
Every
years?
10 years. What are we into year 3, 2?
Yeah, we do.
This is why we're talking.
And we,
My education continues.
that's probably a subcommittee right there, so George can have that place out.
So is what you're describing, that some collection of non-operating districts across the state are starting to talk to one another about possibly
Yes.
amalgamating into a single non-operating district?
Yes, but then logistically, I don't even understand what that means.
It would be a virtual district. I mean, it's not like they're gonna move you, right? It would just be made up of all the schools that only tuition.
They have
But we
nothing
would still just
physically in
tuition to
connection, they
CU.
just have common attributes.
Common
You can
attributes.
tuition wherever you want, and you wouldn't be part of
Yeah, and
CSSU
give us the
where
same
you
chance,
want
but
to.
don't worry about it.
The superintendent gets a helicopter.
There's a lot of empty space in the northeast.
There are a lot of jokes about that.
For
Like,
some
I wanna be
superintendents, it'd be the ideal job, to not have any
That's just it,
schools
right?
and just.
No schools.
Yes.
No employees.
Page 3 is just, another variation on the same theme, thinking again about what if the majority vote yes, the minority vote no, and what you end up with for resulting districts within an issue.
If there's enough no, or a no that makes it so muddy, what body would say we're gonna leave it as it is? Or could say, we leave it like it is?
Oh,
And
after.
forego,
I think that has to be part of the vote.
Part of the articles, as I understand it.
I didn't fully get the question, I apologize.
Do you have to lay out what you do with each outcome when you go to vote? So don't the articles say that if everybody votes to be in their structure to say if everybody votes yes, we have an accelerated merger, but if one town votes no, we have nothing?
Yes, that would be, for accelerated purposes, that's what that would mean.
And then shouldn't any central structure that, and then it's possible you can fall into a mud
Not a mud for them.
if didn't they identify Westford as,
Is it advisable?
yes,
Right, for that
So-
reason.
yeah, so that in essence,
Because Westford's not currently a member of the Union High School Districts, they couldn't be the majority of the members there. There's no majority of 2, so.
but my understanding is the articles need to be, your voting need to be, I shouldn't have used articles. The vote needs to clearly articulate what you have at the other end, given who votes yes and who votes no.
Right.
Well, if you go for the accelerated, it is a yes no vote, right?
It is yes, no.
Everybody's
yes.
in or nothing.
Right.
But in other words, if one town votes no, it doesn't default to, but you just got nothing, you have to have another affirmative vote.
Not necessarily, the articles could default to a no and say that the existing groups that voted to form will form, and now that's what you end up with.
Be the longest ballot process.
So the language Bob was just talking about is there, and that is that within the articles, you will be determining what the status of each of your 5 pre-K through 8 districts communities is. And it's gonna be one of 2, it's gonna be a forced choice, so they're gonna be necessary, or they're gonna be advisable. And to the extent that you require all 5 be necessary, that puts you in the potential for the unified meeting accelerated timeline game.
That's an excellent point. And I understand you can't do a provisional advisable. So in your
Right,
case,
right.
it's as likely that Williston votes no, or Charlotte votes no, or Shelburne votes no. You have to identify clearly at the start which one's advisable. And so it really doesn't fit to.
Well, since we all have assets at CBU, I don't think there's any way you can say that any of the 4 towns are actually advisable. I can see St. George being advisable. But I don't know, what would you do if CBU, I mean, we all have assets at CBU now, so I don't know how you could get away with saying, no, anybody else is not.
Unless you
Why,
buy
unless that was part of the agreement, is how you disperse it out.
And then to that end, how does St. George's vote affect the outcome of whether or not there's an accelerated? Is that in this process?
Yes, because that
What-
can
How
be
we're
included-
defined?
That can be included in the articles. Because St. George isn't part of the Union High School District.
So who decides we're advised us? We do ourselves or this group?
This committee does.
This committee does
Yes.
that, okay. And then I go back to the community and pitch our case.
Yes.
So you have this accelerated, assuming we go down this path, you have this accelerated one, it's all or nothing, in or out. And the next path would be, well, if anybody votes no, leave St. George's side, if anyone else votes no, then we're kind of back to square one. We could decide to go forward for a mud next year or something if we wanted to.
Or within the same year.
Actually, no, it defaults to a mud.
It defaults to a mud.
Yes.
I thought it was all or nothing, no?
It's all or nothing only for the purposes of accelerated. benefits.
Okay,
If it falls to a mud, you end up in the conventional benefits.
So we don't get the 150 and we don't get the first.
You get 864 and 2, and you would sort of.
Yeah, you still get that.
so now I kind of understand Bob's question a bit more, because if we default to a mud and Shelburne and Williston are the two that said no, you know, it'd be most of the, where would CVU go? I mean,
You're still part of CVU High School District regardless.
so CVU High School has
That's
to
why
go
you
no
would-
matter what. But I'm just saying, it just seems really strange that I would think would be kind of interesting. Could you just put in there that if more than one town says no, we go back to the drawing board? I don't know if that's easy.
I would hope so, but it's a good question for your legal counsel. Is there such an article that can do all that? Because you're logically correct. It's one thing if one of you steps away, but if 2 or 3 of you step away, the
Assuming we have,
quality of the outcome is just diminished rapidly.
Would we still have the numbers too, right? It
At
has
least
to-
temporary. At least for a short period of time, for a few years.
yeah, I think you'd get over 900.
You still would?
If you had any three, I think you'd get over 900.
Oh,
Charlotte and Heinsberg and
Any
St.
two.
George.
Any two.
any two would give you 900?
Well, you have to have at least three because you have to have a majority, right?
Are those equal as people?
No.
Oh, you don't.
Regular, real students.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, because the purpose of the law, right, is to make as few single entities as possible. That's not the language they use, but that's the intent of the law. So 2 boards in Chittenden South is better than 5 boards, and 7 boards in Chittenden South. 3 is better than 7.
It shifts the
Always
power
looking to-
significantly.
Yeah, I'm starting to get really nervous as Williston. You would have substantially less representation on percentage wise, I guess. Well, not at the next 2 boards, we still have 3 no matter what, but I don't know. You would be, well, I have to think through that. It does get complicated from a governor's point of view if you only have 2 towns that are decided to join.
Do we have copies of the language that would be presented to voters on the ballot?
Well, you need to develop that language.
And, because that's,
You've got
There are a number of
copies.
exemplars out there.
I started that question and I'm more confused.
Yeah. Thank you for asking the question.
because that's the question, I mean, that's, people are going to need to see that over and over and over again. And we're going to need to explain what it means, I think.
Where did I hang you up on?
I think I
The
have.
ballot
I don't know if you
question.
did. I don't think you did.
The majority of, that we're talking about, to becoming MUD, is that, 3 out of the 5 districts, or is that based on population or number of students? What defines majority?
Community.
So it doesn't matter whether the community is, 10,000 people or 2,000 people, they have the same weight or the same impact.
That's right.
So I think that maybe for me, the part is, it's this, the part that we're still CVU High School and we're not eliminating that. CVU High School, the CVU Union High School is always going to be part of this. So when I look at this picture, it's almost like there needs to be an overlap here so that CVU, if you're a MUD, CVU is still, except for St. George, still encompassing all of these schools. There's no, that doesn't change. Regardless of where we end up, whether 2 vote yes, 3 vote yes, CVU High School, that union school district is still.
Venn diagram style of.
Yeah,
I
so
thought-
I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I think that would help clear up for all of us, me included, how this shapes out.
Can you say that again?
If you make the dotted line solid, the handwritten dotted line solid, and then you make some dotted lines that capture CVU.
Regardless, CVU as an entity is intact, regardless of which one it is.
So does that mean that CVU would always have its own board?
No.
Not in that, not in the first
There's
one.
a situation where CVU could be entirely run by Shelburne and Pittsburgh.
In the first one,
It would be an
The first
addition
one,
to Shelburne.
it's a
Isn't it
new
now anyway?
board and they have equal representation everywhere. As soon as you get to pages 2 and
Got a
3.
majority on the board.
We should clarify exactly those questions now
Yes.
nuanced with Huntington and Chittenden East.
Right.
Because my focus so far has been on tax rates, calculation and assessment of costs, so we fully understand that now. But the question on whether they're at Chittenden East right now, is there a Mount Mansfield Union Board that looks just like the old Mount Mansfield Union Board because Huntington stepped aside?
Right.
I don't think that's the case. I think that what everybody knew as the Mount Mansfield Board, or we know affectionately as the CVU Board, would disappear. And in its place from a governance model would be Huntington has provided access to the new MUD board.
Right. Who has
But
responsibility.
then the
for
answer gets
the-
nuanced when we start talking tax rates and how those are calculated and so forth.
I was just kind of on governance. So, well, first of all, let me just clarify. This says 3 say yes and 2 say no, right? Is there a situation where you can have 2 say yes and 3 say no?
No.
And still?
No, then absolutely nothing changes.
All right. But in this situation, there'd be no CVU board. This would be a single board running
This would
this
be a
district.
Pre-K through 12 board
Right.
running the district.
And then these people would have, these other 2 towns would have K-8 boards and would also be part of the SU, but they wouldn't have they wouldn't have CVU representation. They would have SU representation, but not CVU district representation.
Like my current
I think that's a
situation.
question. That's a really,
Yeah,
we need
I
to get at that question. I think yes.
It would
But
be
I just don't
helpful
know
to
how.
have.
get a question from
players.
I think it
Lord.
would be similar, right, to what I am now. I tuition to CVU, so I have a board, K through 8.
Yep.
And
You're
then
not on the
I-
CVU board.
But I'm not on the CVU, St. George has no representation
You
on
are on
the
the
CVU
SU
board, but I am on the SU board.
But Williston, let's just say Williston is
Right.
already on the CVU board. They don't lose that.
They would if we voted no and 3 other towns voted yes.
I'm not sure.
I don't think
I
so.
want to ask the question.
The Agency of Education doesn't have like a FAQ, like.
Well, we need to get it, and I think those are the white papers that we're gonna be getting some. We're gonna be.
That would be important. That'd be
Yeah,
important.
that's a
Right,
the question is
the
gonna
difference
ask
being
frequently,
St. George.
Well, I mean,
Students
this
are
would be a really
tuition
basic
in.
question for
That's
everyone.
the difference.
Williston's are
Well-
assessed in. So I view these MUDs, they're, the first one is obvious, right? We just have a
It's
new school
different.
district.
That's
Remember,
always-
this is just modifying the supervisory union into fewer boards.
But there's no CVU board, so who's on?
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I think you can make a CVU
I
board
think
that's
we need to
representative.
find out about that. I agree.
Yeah, and the answers are being nuanced and improved as time goes
Yeah.
on. But Chittenden East is the one that began that journey into the MUD side of things with a pre-existing structure that has all these questions.
But just,
So we can ask them that question directly. What are the board structures, who's on them and
what I
what?
mean, are they the definitive answer, or?
Well, no, I would want
Is there-
This Williston.
is there-
I would want to push the how, the AOE, the state, and whoever the legislative council
Well,
is.
yeah, see, I think.
Because I think that in Chittenden East, there's a little bit of making it up along the way, right? Because they
Did
need
that
help just
before the
like
law
we
was
need
passed.
help. So I want to make sure that we're pushing to the right people to say, hey, wait a minute. Here's our example exactly.
So we need a couple of examples, given these 3, what the governance structure would look like.
Including bodies and where they come from and.
You know, Lee, aren't there a few communities that are going through this exercise already? So they might,
Either because it's Vermont, none of them look exactly like us.
That's the,
It's Vermont, this is part of what this law is trying to deal with too, because it's Vermont, there are 350 variations.
yeah.
If there's the vote, and just for argument's sake, the 3 smallest communities vote no, and the 2 larger vote yes, the thing is done. And then we're just sitting waiting for 2019 to happen,
You can go to a repo.
or there's opportunities to go back to the same group and vote again and see if maybe you can come up with a MUD instead of.
Right.
would be the next Act 46 committee that would get after the conversation.
And the role of this particular study committee could play out through the end of June. So if we had a vote in May, let's say, this body here could say, let's do another vote June 15th.
So Colleen, I kind of feel like this bears on our communication strategy.
Yeah.
Because if we don't even know like how this works, it's gonna be really hard to communicate that.
Oh, Eric, it's much easier to communicate with.
Well, Eric, the good news is the person at the agency in charge of this starts tomorrow morning,
She wrote the law.
but the good news is she wrote the law, so.
So this will be on our
she
agenda for
begins
the next
around
meeting.
8 o'clock.
So as we're thinking about, closing up the meeting, what do we need to know for the next meeting? What agenda topics we have, obviously, we'll need to revisit this.
And with this in mind, that's going to be a pretty important question at the Williston
November
forum,
10th.
which is November 10th.
And it may be that part of these public forums would be questions that we don't have answers to.
We can collect more questions.
Right.
But again, I thought we talked about the initial forum is just to lay out the concept, not to.
Right, we don't
Have to
necessarily have
answer
to
every
introduce those
question.
kind of complications at this point, because it's all, we're still learning.
But I think it's going to be the first question we'll get out of Williston, probably from someone on your own board.
And the second question,
So
well, who decides where my kids go to school?
Not from Williston.
I already asked that question, that was one of my questions to you. Who decides, as a Williston resident, on this down the road, like, is it assumed that my kids go to Williston, or would someone decide that they go somewhere else? I mean, what is, how does that work? Because actually, that's a pretty important question.
Good point, Eric, that, as far as communications go, and if we're gonna have these public forums and try to start getting the initial, how did you phrase it? The initial laying out what's there, what's ahead of us for a vote that's coming up, that we would have to be able to go to the public forums and be confident in our presentations without having answers and being able to say we don't have all the answers.
Which is unfortunate, because that gets back to, I think, the hardest part of this communication process is the perception that it's a poorly considered law. And that-
Yeah, I think the story can be told a whole different way. We're just starting and we're going to really be part of it. And as part of it, we're asking you up front what your input is. So it's just as much, putting out, gaining, a reputation, giving the right impression that we're doing the hard work and we're asking the right questions. I think that's the best way to be able to do it.
And I think that's what people are looking for. They learn a lot about Act
Yeah.
46.
They want to know who's considering it, who from their community, is doing this, and what are the questions on the table, because they don't know.
I agree, and I think because especially the past years, the past 5 years at least, of the increase in education spending and the general public outcry that education's out of control. I mean, it's some action, it might not be a perfect action, but we are going to consider it.
But it's a fine line, I totally get what Eric is saying, it's a really fine
I
line
know.
between recommending
Yeah.
blindly moving forward
Yeah.
and recommending the best option, while also being honest and saying, hey, listen, we're doing this the best time, and
Yeah,
this is what we're trying to
absolutely.
do.
Considering.
And I think you're right, you gotta communicate the fact, like I was saying, we're always volunteers, we're just trying to figure this out. And, here's what we've learned, and we're not trying to pull any wool over anyone's eyes, we're trying to figure this out.
We're trying to get as smart as we can in as short amount of time as possible. But we're faced with, this is what it looks like in Vermont.
Yeah.
This is the map of Vermont. This is how complex it is. So there is not a short, easy answer to, what happens if this, because, that's different here, everywhere, because we're configured differently. And in a way, that is, again, part of what the law is trying to rectify. So I think if we can figure out how to say that in a way that sounds smarter, that it's very complex, it's part of what the law is trying to rectify, and that we really are trying to get as smart as we can in as short a period as possible, so that you can make the best recommendation to your communities. I think people understand that.
And part of this will be us presenting some kind of timeline of when this body needs to make decisions. Is this maybe a useful time to
Perfect time
talk
to
about
segue.
this?
That's the next item on the agenda.
Well done.
Yeah.
So these are certain-
Yes.
Oh, they did,
I
okay.
sent it out.
Gotcha, thanks.
Yeah.
Colin, do you want to speak to the framework of your Gantt chart?
Is that
Speak to-
simple?
It is.
Oh, yeah.
You focus on issues that we follow.
I don't know. It's a different view. It took Mike's feedback. This is also useful to have his visual of the graph. So, all of us have been trying to figure out calendar, and I thought that at some point it might be helpful to have a visual that has some markers, and obviously there's a whole lot more detail that's going to need to go into this, but this is a first run at when decisions need to be made, and anyone who's a graphics person that wants to take on this kind of charge, that will be welcome. But backing up from a vote 516, if you look on the far right in the middle of the page, and that's just because of the conversation we had at the last meeting about whether or not we need 45 days and so forth, and when would decisions need to be made. And if you're reading from right to left, going backwards, 419 in the middle of the page, the State Board of Ed acts on a report that we would submit. And again, the timing, this is just playing what is. So the 419 date is based on when the State Board of Ed meets. What is it, every third Thursday and Tuesday?
Thursday.
Every third Tuesday.
Yep.
Every third Tuesday.
At 425, is that really a decision that this committee makes?
No, that's where Mike's drawings here are useful. And so some of this is like, so if let's just talk about the State Board of Ed acting on 419 to allow us the time to warn and vote 30 days. And actually 416 is less than 30. But if 419 is the date when the State Board of Ed acts, and that's like our last date before the State Board of Ed, what do we have to do before then? And how do we respond as a study committee to what the State Board of Ed does? Maybe we get that news on a Tuesday through a telephone tree or whatever, social media. And then what do we do? At some point, the local boards would need to actually warn the vote. We might have an advisement as a study committee about what the structure would look like. So that's, good questions. How does that play out? What happens? Backing it up, the Agency of Education has said that they need 4 to 6 weeks to review our report. Then we would need to respond to the Agency of Education. And then that final draft goes to the State Board of Ed. So there's a period of, let's say, 6 weeks between when we submit our draft of a report to the Agency of Ed, 4 to 6 weeks. We respond to whatever the agency says. Something's got to happen there. Our local boards need to review it. And then we need to submit a final report to the State Board of Ed that they act on.
Yeah, it's a busy stretch in there, and I'm really grateful that Colin took a first cut at this. Those are my margin notes, and as I mentioned earlier, I would have used better penmanship, but I know we're going to be looking at my penmanship tomorrow. We recognize there has to be at least one public forum per community on the front end. You can certainly load up later, add more, add one centralized one later, and so forth, but the minimum that you're going to satisfy is one per community. Your local boards, remember, have an important function here, and that is the review and comment function. So you'll need to decide purposefully when you want to do that with your local boards. Now, Colleen reminded me that you've got this wonderful common carousel structure that allows you to perhaps get that done in one evening. it's your burden to consume that feedback from local boards before you're satisfied with the draft that you're then sending off to the agency. Item 4 is just a reminder that since this is not going to occur prospectively, if it occurs in the springtime and not during your typical winter town meeting, annual meeting date, then anytime a school district warns a special annual meeting, which is what this would require, you gotta have at least 30 days to warn. So that's it. You really want to be sure you've got enough cushion in there for the board to take that action between there and the vote date. The reference 5 just speaks to after 44, whenever the vote date is going to be set, 45 days thereafter is when it gets certified by the clerks. And that's the point at which the new board commences its operations. So that's the time in which the new board can get itself organized, get launched, finally, actually with the Secretary of Education, and begin its work. Item 6 is just a reference from last time. I think it was Keith last time, who's not here tonight, mentioned that he had a conversation with the executive director / attorney of the VSBA. And it's clear that that was the conversation they had, was that the votes need to occur by mid-May to allow for the 45-day reconsideration period. That's under reconsideration at this point, and we should know later this week about whether or not it's actually true or not. There's a lot of attorneys out there saying, no, the law speaks to the date of the vote, not the date of the reconsideration period. So if it's a vote date, a date certain by June 30th, this gives you some flexibility, some cushion in your calendar, because we're talking about a backward calendar now.
So does the vote include a vote for new school board members too? That's all part of the same.
It's gotta be concurrent.
It's gotta be concurrent.
Yeah, it does, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Probably not wise to go too much later than the middle of May. Drift off quickly in the summer.
Now, some other Act 46 committees are looking to go to vote town meeting day for one express purpose. And it's to get a second bite at the apple in the event that there's a failure in one community or more, to have a re-vote possibility by June 30th. So that gives them enough cushion to perhaps get a second vote in by June 30th. So to the extent that you're comfortable not doing that, you sort of think it's still a springtime vote.
And if I could just comment on that, I think culturally we've learned over the years that if we have a failed bond vote or a failed something budget, communities have needed the time to digest that and come back. So I don't know. At some point we'll want to have a conversation about whether or not we would want to even try to have a second vote within that period of time. And if we think that's not advisable, it gives us a little bit more flexibility with the final schedule.
The memorandum came out last week from the agency saying that they really need 4 to 6 weeks before the state board meeting to see your committee's draft report and to give you some comment and input and so forth, to feedback on it. So that's a 4 to 6 week window between when you're submitting it and the date of the state board meeting. And it's going to be their burden to get that back to you in time to make the state board agenda, which is filed about 10 days before the state board meeting. So there's a really tight window in there between the time they get it back to you, you then finalize it, hand it back over for inclusion on the state board agenda about 10 days before the meeting. My players been hearing the shrieks and howls and screams about that 6 week window, and they're talking about what they could do with it. Again, when the lead people start tomorrow morning. And that, I think, are most of my notes.
So some of this, using the subcommittee structure again, there might be a point where this body makes a decision, gives the input, and you charge 3 people to do the final edits on the report and do the submission. So, we might build some of that into that as well. This is a moving target, and this will continuously change as we have more information, but you can see the backup plan. It's really a tight schedule. What I see is that I'm suggesting that December 7th, and this might even be before the first public forum at Williston's the 10th. Oh no, I'm sorry, November. So December 7th, I'm thinking that any subcommittee work, there should be a substantial body of work that's completed by that point. And we know that we hit the middle of December and it's hard to get geared up with a whole lot of activity before the second week of January. So people need to have their family life as well. It's important.
Eric said something last meeting that really resonated for me on my drive home, and that was about emphasis of energy around this committee. And there's potential cost, Eric, as I heard you say, of dawdling with the committee work, potentially at the expense of really strong communication efforts at the end. It may not be possible to do both at the same window of time. So for me, that really reinforced, I think, an early decision point. This committee, not tonight, but soon, and that is a targeted vote day. I heard Jean say that May is probably better than June. That's the will of the committee, the way we'll be thinking about May vote, and just start to actually backward calendar map the rest of this from that point forward. So, a May vote again precludes a second vote, but that may not be an objective anyway. And we just then need to figure out which state board meeting we're talking about, getting this in, and get work there.
And in our conversations about this, we also talked about this study committee saying, yes, we are going for the accelerated, or no, we're not.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that? When do you think we should make that decision, perhaps?
Well,
December?
I think certainly before the new calendar year starts, we need to be settled about that decision. There just isn't a lot of room for error after that. So vacillate back and forth on that.
So, but if we're not going for the accelerated, there's no reason to work towards a May vote. Not necessarily.
It gives you up to a year, 13 months after that, so gives you the manage.
And then at the same time, there's also your comment resonated with me as well about the timing of getting our work done, that we don't dawdle. We gotta move, but then be thoughtful about the process. To start laying the foundation for really good decision making, but it may be that we do choose to wait. That may be more prudent. Maybe people may want to do that. At the same time, there's a lot of energy that's going to be going into work and stretch something out over 2 years, 3 years, and that's a different scenario that starts playing out in different ways.
We talked a little bit about community forums early, where we're really just explaining Act 46 and how we're reacting to it. Where, if we did go, say, 5-16 kind of vote, is there a time to go back to the community to say, this is what the committee's decided, or this is where the committee's very close to deciding, we need your input? Where does happen in January?
January, February, January? I would say end of January. I could be wrong, but 2-1 is the study committee, and this is just playing with ideas about the timing of how long the agency of education needs. But I'm thinking if an edited report went to the agency of education on the 8th, that's like the last day to hit a window to get the April 19th State Board of Ed meeting. So if we need to have some good decisions by February 1st, let's say, and it's just an arbitrary date. So it seems to me that for us to have good decisions, we would probably want to have some further community feedback end of January. Or maybe we wait and do that between, well, the agency of ed is sitting on our, working through our report.
We'll do that. That's
It's
a
hard
good
to pour the
question,
horse.
which is I think about, yeah.
Yeah.
Depends on how you're positioning the meeting.
Right.
Is it truly to seek feedback because we might still change something in what we're recommending? Or is it just, the first meeting that says, here's what we did as a committee and here's why we'd like your support? And if you think about, what else is going on at that time of year, usually, third week in January is when you're warning the budget, and, you know, at least in Shelburne, I guess in other towns have the joint town and school board meeting. So, you know, that's usually, you know, decently attended for these types of things. We need to get 15 people instead of 3, although a lot of them leave if the select board goes first. But you know, those I think are your opportunities to be in front of the public again. And I guess, you know, the question is said that having one public forum is required by the law. Does it say what that public forum is actually supposed to do? You know, again, is it something where we're seeking input, or is it just, you know, we're answering questions and communicating information?
You bring up a good point, you know, why would we do it in January and February and get no one to show up, when we could do it on our traditional town meeting day, and just present it as a status of, we did these things in the fall and we got your input, and here's what the committee worked on, and here's what we are submitting, or what we submitted 32 days ago to AOE.
Yeah.
You know, you get folks that.
Get them both times. And then we also have town meeting day. So we've
That's
got
what
our
he said.
traditional,
That's what
he's
he said.
putting
Just do
the
the
budget
forum.
forum, but then you also have town meeting day.
I think, no, that's what they were saying, is March,
Oh.
whatever date it is, that, and certainly that's the date where you get the most people, at least in our town.
I'm seeing the potential for 3.
Again, it goes to what's the purpose of, what is the legal obligations or the minimum that we're required to fulfill with a public forum? Because having a public forum and getting feedback from 3 people, does that really accomplish much other than being able to say you had it, maybe those three people feel good about it, or be more pissed than they already were?
So in the criteria for, should we pass this around? So the report, if we were to go forward with an accelerated objective, what's coming around now is the template that we need to work with. I'll wait for it to go around. Those of you who already have it, if you look on page 2, you can see some of the questions. So this template will provide our guidance for a report that would be moving forward. And the communication strategy, you can see the 1, 2, 3. The 4th bullet is within our plan. We have what's our public input on options. What did we do? How did we go about doing them? So it's 10 after 7. Do we want to talk more about the calendar, or do we have enough fuzzy information that we know that we're going to be getting more information from the state, right?
My suggestion is this, that folks just appreciate the sort of touch points along the way that we're responsible for. To not get hung up tonight on specific dates. What Colleen and I can do between meetings is to, having the core question answered about the 45-day piece, thinking if it's a will of the group about a May vote, bookmark things afterwards and just revise this for your consideration. Does that work?
I mean, nobody around the table thinks we should go to town meeting, or do they actually rephrase that? Does anybody around the table think we should try for a town meeting day?
That's absolutely plausible.
Good. Me too.
I was gonna ask, is there a consensus that we should be trying to hit a vote within, this to be accelerated? Or do we think there's too much work and too much that we don't know? That we should just be saying, you know what? Or when do we get to that point? That we say.
I think in December, we have to have a point where this body says, yes, we're moving forward.
I think there's enough of a carrot available on June 30th to try and fail the first time.
And the stick is why didn't you?
Right. Why didn't you
We
even
open
try?
ourselves up to
So, yeah.
criticism for not getting this?
Yeah.
What do others feel about this? Is this a big question? Does anyone has an opinion?
As long as, I think what we're saying is we want to go full bore as if we're aiming
I think
for.
we should try, right?
Responsibility to the community,
Right,
right?
to try.
Remember what
Get some
Jonas
of these
says,
governance things straightened out. I'm not really sure I want to say.
do or do not.
I'm definitely signed up
Try.
to doing it. But continue to work. Right.
It's a great
Joe?
Missed it.
Honestly, I really think we could do this for June 30th, and just like Yoda says, do or do not.
We're just gonna try.
So,
That's good.
Yeah.
That can be our motto.
I'm merely his messenger.
It's our first week.
What?
That's our first week. There is a-
Wait till you see my Halloween floats. Halloween.
What, a bill or extra?
Yeah.
When's your legislative breakfast?
Oh, that's right.
Well, that's on the agenda for next Tuesday.
It should be in January. We have a calendar.
That's another important. So let's look at some of the actions on the second page of our agenda. Thank you, Mike. Name of the committee. Does anyone have that, we met on that Wednesday, seems like ages ago. We talked about what we call ourselves. Sometimes it's gone out there as the merger
Yeah, the
committee.
first point being never to call it the merger committee.
Yeah.
Just sounds like it's.
Yeah.
Corporate
It's what to do
theory.
with
So
That tells people a lot.
A better education tool.
So, one of our actions is going to be try to come to some agreement about what we call ourselves. Perspectives, anyone else want to speak to the name? Jean? Kelly?
Except for Russ laughing, I mean, Act 46 study committee probably sounds better than the merger committee.
Yes.
But it doesn't explain.
I know.
But people do
Assumes
know what
people.
Act 60 is, right?
I don't know,
Not Act
but
60.
what's the man on the street? Do people really know outside of, people like ourselves? Yes, not.
But at least our name would give them someplace easy to go when they type it into Google,
Well, make them ask.
Act 46, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's either a ban on cigarettes in Missouri or. I think Act 46 study committee is the right. I think Mark's right. Don't alienate half the population by calling it the merger committee.
Social media place them on. Google the name you want before you pick the name.
Oh.
Oh, did you-
No, just saying.
So do we have a motion on the table? I don't know if we can do formal actions without running it, but, Dave, do
If
you
you
have
have
any
the
proposal?
I propose we call it the Act 46 study committee.
It's already on the
Do you,
No,
We
it's-
do
Us and
consensus that we
Addison
decided
Rutland.
last year.
Because they named theirs the same way.
I'm not sure how to do it, but all those in favor, if you say aye, I'll probably get a nose. All those in
Aye.
favor? Opposed? Abstain? Okay, great. So we will be officially known as the CSSU Act 46 Study Committee.
We've got some documents that need to be scrubbed retroactively.
Yes.
Right, and everything on the website.
We'll get our IT team on.
Merge and replace.
Public forums. Let's have some,
Just similar, you're in the majority, let's see, Addison Rutland, Fairfield, Windsor, Washington Central, Shaftesbury, they're all, yeah, 46 studies.
excellent.
Use our generated CSSU.
And I hope people come around and see other communities.
Just go to-
and how
There we go, to Zach.
much we're ahead of the game, do you know?
Okay, so let's have another formal action here. Proposal about budget forum, connecting our public forums for the Act 46 Study Committee to budget forums. Is there a motion on the table?
Get a motion to combine budget forms with.
Clearly articulated agendas, differentiation. Okay. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? No strong opinion or abstain?
I'm a little uncomfortable voting on something like this, I think the intent we've discussed, right? The intent is that all the communities right now are intending to have this in combined with their budget forum, we'll have the structured agenda.
Okay,
That
so
they
let's
can use.
revisit this the next meeting, and I'm not sure if there's a board chairs meeting before then, but it might be, no.
So do you,
I think
would
the
you
board
rather have
chairs
the
would
local
be
boards vote
involved.
on that? I'm not sure.
Well, I don't see that we need to vote for it, isn't this just?
Well,
a-
because some group is going to be charged to come together with an agenda and structure for how that works. And they will come back to our next meeting and say, this is our suggested.
Right, but if something happens, I don't know, the Williston, all the power goes out and they can't have their meeting that night, do we really need to vote on these things?
Okay, so we'll charge, that's a good question, and I don't feel strongly one way or the other, but we'll need to task
Yes,
a
that
small
will
group of people to come together with some kind of proposal for how those would be structured.
Well, and I think it's important that we leave here knowing that all 5 of us are gonna do the same thing and not, so that's sort of why we vote. We vote to say, 5 of our districts are gonna combine these, is I guess why we're
Well,
voting.
and it also needs to get on calendars.
Right.
Didn't we just vote it and pass it?
Well, I guess, but I'm just trying, I guess I'm
Yeah,
trying to
there's
understand the reluctance of.
There were some eyes around the table thinking, I don't know why we're voting on this, so we're just regrouping.
Oh, all right, my intent I thought the voting was just to make sure we're all going out of here on the same page on these action items. And if someone disagreed with the direction, now's the time to speak and raise your point.
Right.
That's the sole purpose. All those in favor of what we're discussing in that capacity.
I'm used to votes being very legal, they carry weight, and so that's why I'm just wiggling a little bit here. But I don't mean to hold everything up, I'm just saying.
No, I
Use it
understand it,
as-
but I don't know
going
what
forward,
else
it's
to
an-
call it, what's our consensus on it?
Our consensus, I think, around the table, the consensus is that each community should have a discussion, it should be held at the same night as their budget forum, and that we're going to have a smaller subcommittee put together an agenda for it.
So there's a charge that's coming from this group here, so if there was a strong opposition to
Can I
that, we
also
would know that.
throw a wrench in it while we're talking about it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think that the local boards should have some say in this.
Yeah.
You're co-opting the meeting,
That's a good point.
and they may not want to connect these. They may, I don't necessarily think that's the way to go, but I have 4 members on my board who may have a different.
So right now, it's the recommendation of this committee.
It
that's
should be
what
the
we do.
recommendation of this committee, and we should all go back and represent that as the recommendation of this committee at the next school board meeting, which is next Tuesday. So this can happen quick. Maybe it's an item for discussion and then action.
So for our minutes,
Or
can
action.
we say that the recommendation from the study committee is to combine the 4 public forums for Act 46 with the budget forums, having them on the same evening for efficiencies, and that individual boards will make that decision of whether or not they agree.
I would be comfortable with that.
Okay, is that, Sandy?
So that'll be an action item at the next board meeting, at the
Yeah.
local.
So we'll have to make sure board chairs bring that to the local board.
Yeah, that's you.
Got it.
Are you more comfortable with that?
Yes.
I mean, that's a good
Yes.
point. The bigger question is, how do we move forward with some of the tasks that need to happen
Right.
here? And, whether we call it a straw vote and people nod their heads, or we actually have a voice vote or something, we're gonna need to figure that out.
But that's
I
not
think-
the CSSU board or the CVU board voting on it, it's just the 5
I think
town
the
boards.
CVU board needs to have a discussion about how they want to be engaged with that. I'm thinking.
So just a quick question of the public forums. I should be able to answer this, but Mike, are these public forums a presentation by the local board about Act 46, or is it a presentation from this committee about Act 46? So when we go to the boards for our board of approval, we're asking for, it should be, it has to be a little more formal. It's like, will you allow this other committee to intrude on your?
But it's at the conclusion of the budget session.
Well, it's gonna be a separate agenda
Right, yeah.
item, but I'm saying,
It's
maybe
still
it's not
there.
even an agenda
Sure.
item, it's a whole other presentation.
So prior to next Tuesday's meeting, if there are a few people who want to get together with just, hammer out, this would be the suggested agenda and how it would be structured, that would be helpful, so.
I guess to Mark's point, I mean, to the extent this is like a separate legal body,
Yes,
that I think in some way it has to be apparent to the community that it's not the school board decision. The school board's not
yeah,
necessarily endorsing everything that the committee is
Yeah.
saying. We happen to be on their agenda, but we're a separate entity.
I think, Mike and Elaine, this might be helpful for you to speak to that.
I just think that the important part of it is to make sure that if it's on the same night as the budget forum, that it's very clearly delineated, there's a budget forum, and that's the whole board that's having this budget forum, and then there is a Act 46 study committee forum that is being hosted by the committee members.
Remember, the committee was formed from the local board, so it's not like it's really a
Right.
separate
I think
organization.
that's fine.
Right, but the committee members could be voting differently from how a majority of the board.
Right, but this is,
We're
this is
not-
all informational,
Well,
right? This is
I'm
the
not-
Act 46, and this is.
But, it's not
Right,
like.
you have a
committee-
vote on this, but
Yeah,
you're
you
not
have
on
a
your
vote,
local
right,
board.
but it's not like, Dave and Tim and I are required to vote as a majority of the Shelburne board supports or doesn't.
Right.
We're not going back and polling our member boards to say, okay, how do you want us to vote?
No, and in fact, that's a piece that I've underscored several times when we've been in meetings, that's not the role of the local boards.
Mike, you want to give us the,
I think structurally you've got two choices, and I think one is that you can ask to be invited as a committee for a separate portion of that evening to go before or after the board goes to this budget forum, budget
yeah.
forum. Or you as a committee can be there on your own and just make it contingent with that evening meeting and warn separately as a committee. The subcommittee of this group being that evening. Either way, I think you've got some stylistic things to think about and some symbolic things to think about, and that is who presents. Do you want to only be, or primarily be, folks from that local community presenting that night, or do you give a different message if others from the community are there presenting to show some sense of broader cross-border thinking?
And I can see a scenario where two or three members from a town are, they're on the communications and the social media committee, but want somebody who has been on the finance or the governance, and those are our other two major committees, would like somebody to come in, even if they're not a member of the Shelburne board, we'd like Kevin to come, or, something along those lines, to present to the meeting that we're on.
I think it would be an opportunity missed if only folks from, if only members of this community show up in respective communities only for those meetings. I think that would be an opportunity lost.
so for those who want to talk about this question, if we could leave for like 5 minutes at the end of this meeting, just to set up a time of how we're going to communicate whether it's an actual meeting where we sit down face to face on a Wednesday morning in Georgetown Hall, or, we do it electronically. So, okay, so let's go back to the financial subcommittee. Questions authority. The authority piece is, we had that discussion earlier about who charges whom to do what and where that comes from. But if we could just get an update about what's happening at the state, knowing that we have some finance questions that are out there, but we may have some state resources coming our way.
Bob, you mind speaking to what you learned on Friday about the work in Massachusetts?
One of the resources this community will be, or this committee will be looking at is the role of DMC in providing the standard analysis for districts across the state. And in talking with Nikki South, who is the head of the Act 46 resource group at DSBA, she's indicated that CSSU is at the front of the line to be a recipient or a partner with DMC to try out the analysis tool they're developing. And likely she will be in touch with the committee sometime in the next week and a half to kind of arrange a first glance use of that tool.
So Bob, is it your sense to be prudent to perhaps have you get your hands on that before the financial subcommittee really starts to figure out what it is interested in, what it needs and wants? It feels like there could be some duplication of early effort otherwise.
Yeah, there's taking the agenda away from the meeting after this meeting to putting it into this meeting. There's three choices the finance committee could look to for analysis. They could lean on someone like myself or someone like Jane to spend a couple of hours and do that level of analysis and conclusion as to what tax rates may look like under the umbrella. You could retain somebody qualified in the state to provide a little bit of consulting work the same way you hired a consultant as a RED, not you all, but the RED committee hired a consultant, or you could wait for DMC. And it depends on the quality of information you want.
When does DMC think they're gonna have something?
2 weeks.
I got lots of work to do.
Yeah. One of the things that finance subcommittee could work on though is, and I don't know if this makes sense or not, Bob, but start hammering out some of the details or broad questions, I should say, not details, about assets and liabilities and how that might play out, or maybe just articulate the questions that would be there. Does that, I don't know if that's a good use of time or if everything should just wait until we get DMC.
DMC is not, as far as I know, doing anything on the assets and liabilities side. The good news there is they have retained a lawyer to provide a 2 or 3 page white paper on the question of assets and liabilities in the arena of a considered consolidation. So that document also should probably be in hand before you begin working in earnest on that subject.
What do we think the law currently says about the assets and liabilities of the
Well,
various school districts?
This is, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not your
Claim
lawyer.
it.
But the read of the law has people lean towards behaving like adults and putting all the risks and liabilities in a pool, and then they become a common interest of the new school district, and then you just divvy them up by ADM, and you're obligated to accept your portion of liabilities that prior to that day someone else authored. But in the state of Vermont, no one ever settles with the easy solution and consistent solution that's on the center of the table. People start raising interesting questions on why they want to do it just a little bit differently. For example, at this Friday meeting, I heard that Belvedere, who looks like they'll be consolidated, probably against their will, is planning to sell the real estate around their school back to the town before consolidation occurs. You know, so there's those kind of questions that arise with a profile of assets and liabilities that you might have not been signature to prior.
I mean, I think it's worth reminding people that just 2 years ago, we put all of our assets and liabilities around special ed, that central office, and that had the impact of, changing things around the SU in different ways for different people.
So would it be useful for the finance, people interested in the finance piece, just to get together to perhaps start articulating, and I'm thinking special ed, what did we learn from that consolidation related to finance issues or whatever? So if that becomes an FAQ, those people most interested in how the dollars move might be able to draft something like that, and then wait for the DMC and the other white paper report related to it.
I mean, given that we can't do everything at once, I would think it might be worth
Just get together.
waiting. I'm thinking it might just be worth waiting. I would spend a lot of time talking about it if they have a really good white paper that would answer all, would be really efficient.
I agree.
Okay,
Now, the one thing that I do, back to my original questions,
Yeah.
is that, and this is all about timing, I just don't know the timing on this whole thing, but I think at some point, I think it would be wise to have a third party come in and look at the facilities around so that we can have a third party neutral, or neutral, not the word I'm looking for, but third party look, objective, there we go, look at the state of, and I'm not talking about, I'm sorry, Dave, I'm really talking about someone's gonna come in and say whether or not the hallway should have windows or not, but really, is the roof, are the windows, is things falling apart, and just kind of put the whole thing together for us, and that's not gonna be an overnight kind of work, and plus we have to hire somebody, so.
Yeah.
To what end, Gene, as far as the work of this committee?
I would like to be able
So that we don't feel
to,
like we're getting a lemon by buying Charlotte's used car, or?
yeah, frankly,
Who's going out to the ball right here?
There we go.
I think that's a great idea. We should meet on November 4th to discuss it.
But no, I mean, I don't know, I mean, there's a, Heinsberg's got a building, a white building or something that's maybe not an asset. I know Charlotte's got roof problems, I'm sure Williston's got problems, I just think it would be good to be able to say, you're not going into this blindly picking up a $15 million problem in Charlotte, right? We've looked at them all, they're pretty close, we're comfortable as a committee saying throw it all in one pot.
so we don't want to add anything to Bob's agenda, because he's pretty busy with the budget, and we would have to hire somebody to do that. Does it, and Bob, I'm looking to you for some direction
I'm ready to
here.
answer.
Do you want to pull a subgroup of this committee together to just
Colleen really
have a
wants this group.
conversation? Just an
Well,
hour,
if the
an
group-
hour conversation about,
If the group generally believes it's meaningful work,
Yeah.
then our office can work on finding the right person to do it. And that would probably be one of the firms that some of you already retain as your architect and engineers. And the problem, as you all well know, is you reach at very different places. So somehow somebody's got to pull this together so the pulling is consistent.
Yes.
yeah,
And we can have a proposal for your consideration from that team of architects for you to look at the next time you meet.
okay, you good with that?
Yeah.
Where I know from the Shelburne perspective, we have that work pretty much done on our facility. I mean, our other
Right.
schools, I don't know where they are with.
Okay, the quick map, you have, the good news is there's 3 architects in support of the 5 of you. That's less than 5 architects in support of the 5 of you. The other good news is
6 architects.
Shelburne most recently finished their study of their facility. Williston is on contract to finish theirs in the next 2 months. I missed the community meeting this week to know exactly where that stands. Who I left out. Charlotte did one about 2 years ago.
2 years old.
And Heinsberg's never done one, and CVU has not done one since they put $23 million in facility in 2003.
But we have it on top of it though, we have, what's his name from our Scottish guy that's played golf.
Oh, there was down in half of Scotland.
You know,
Tom Barton.
Tom Barton.
The Irish.
The Irish guy.
Irish guy.
Sorry, Tom.
Yeah.
Never worked for you again.
This isn't being taped, right? Tom will do it for you. But I mean,
So let me see what I can pull together for the next meeting for your consideration.
But is the
And
idea
so-
to make sure there aren't any massive hidden, like somebody's got radioactive waste and asbestos, or
What's it over?
No, it's a little more tame than radioactive waste. It's understanding the level of deferred maintenance. And if Mark and his team in Charlotte for the past 15 years have ignored, spent no dime on the facility, and whoever takes it over tomorrow is likely gonna have to do the roof, the driveway and all of that, then this committee wants to know that. The committee prior to you tried to do that by gathering wisdom from their building principals and facilities directors. And those results came back interesting, but not consistent. Not consistent enough that you could then make a decision as this group on who to share things with.
So for the next meeting, and I know I talked to a few people who are interested in the finance piece. We'll figure out a time for you to, how you get together with Bob, and if you could come back with a very, very short report of, these are the 4 questions that, people want to know. This is how we're going to get at it. This is what we need to do it. Does that work? And I'll talk with you, Bob, after.
I think that's perfect, and I may spoon feed that to them
Right.
sometime in the next 3 days.
Exactly.
We're good.
Yeah, actually, great.
Have we settled on what this committee's ability is to spend money on?
Yeah, that was my other question.
Everything's got to run through the SU. And so if there's a proposal for, we need to hire somebody, I'm not sure how the authority would work, but Elaine, do you have a Bob?
Well,
My notes say this committee is authorized to spend 25,000.
And we don't want a subcommittee to say, okay, I'm gonna go and spend
Correct, and I
$12,000.
wouldn't-
So it should be right around this table.
Yeah, any spending decision should come back to this group.
So when we meet next, hopefully there's a proposal from your group that would come here and we would have a decision.
So just to be really clear, the contract that we've negotiated with the SBA has 20,000 of that earmarked for consulting, for financial, those 2 areas.
Financial and legal. And we,
Not legal, consulting. Consulting and financial, legal were on our own.
okay,
Although it turns out that we're on our own sort of, because they're doing these white papers. So we're getting a whole lot more support this time around than we got with the.
This would fall under consultant, so.
Well, and the good news for you all who approved 25,000 is you don't want to go above the cap of 25,000 spending, because then that drives some other problems for you in the consolidation line.
no, and we just don't want, a road subcommittee to want to spend the whole pot. So it's gotta come back here. Okay, so, communications, Kevin and I, and, put the word out to others who are interested in social media, we're gonna meet, with Mike Camphor and Jessica Wilson, just to talk about portals and so forth. And so those who are interested in the social media element, I'll put that out and let you know, and that is gonna show up as well. But I think that we need to have another committee meeting related to writing articles and so forth. And so, we have 2 pieces. One is we need to have our web presence, focus on that, and beginning to write articles. And so, the Wednesday at 8 a.m., how many of you around the table would be able to use those times, or do you think it might be missed? Because I would say Wednesday at 8 a.m. for communications, if we can do that this week.
It might be a couple minutes later.
All right, so you'll get summaries from me about where people are and so forth. Governance, we need to have people start thinking about the modeling, and we're gonna get more information from the state, and so I think we need to wait perhaps on that. I have in my notes that next meeting, we want to talk more about the models and what that looks like, and the representation and so forth.
One thing that comes to mind with respect to governance is, it's my understanding that in Williston, you folks have a committee that sort of like represents the parents and the teachers and brings recommendations to the board with respect to.
Well, that was gonna be one of my suggestions, is that could we
Right.
have a group of people that just sit down and start drafting out a recommendation for what that local representation might look like? And I have people that are interested in it.
I just heard a rumor that Williston has a novel
The FAP.
way of doing FAP,
It
right?
depends how you're thinking about it. Eric, Mark, Dave, Kelly, Karen, Kevin, Jean, all expressed some interest in working on that local voice question.
Tina and I are both going to show up to every committee.
Yeah.
Remember signing up for that?
Is that a useful way to spend some time, is just start thinking about what that might be? Give something for people to respond to?
I think it's just a really important one to give in some thoughtful time to, because you don't want to start promising things that we can't deliver. You don't want to under-promise, so.
Can we ask those who are interested in that to figure out how to get together, and you can do a Google Doc or something like that, just start chewing on it so that we can respond to it maybe next time?
Yeah, also, is there a list of what things you can and can't do as far as the pages of education is concerned? Like, we decided we had some great idea for a local governance piece, but that wasn't.
Well, it would still have to be in line with statutes and roles and responsibilities that are outlined in statutes. You couldn't give the local group authority that belongs to the board, for
Sure.
instance.
So
Other
is there
than that, I
a quick,
think you could be
easy place
creative.
to find where the boundaries are?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Title 16, 562 and 563.
We'll get that for you.
If you don't feel like you have a place where you can spend some time over the next couple of weeks, let me know. But what I'm gonna do is take this master list, you all responded to a survey saying what you were interested in, I'm gonna share that with you. And then we'll set up a structure of how you're going to work together. For example, the communications subcommittee, we set up a Google Doc, and whether or not we're there or not, people working on that subcommittee were able to come together and add to that. And so if the group that wants to think about the local voice in relationship to a larger board, how that would work, I'd be looking for someone to take leadership of that subcommittee, and let's figure that out, how to move forward. So you'll get an email from me tomorrow that might outline some of this. And those who can meet for 2 minutes, I know it's 7:45 and we're going past our time. Those who feel that they can meet, stand up 5 minutes in the corner to figure out where you're gonna meet next, that would be helpful too. Questions about this part of it? This subcommittee work? I know it's a little fuzzy, but I hope it starts taking on some form that makes sense. Summarizing and talking points.
I have to tell you, I wrote down actions, I wrote my question, and then I wrote, ask a group 2, that's as far as I got. I can't remember if it was Kelly or Karen, you said, if we don't get to it, come on back. So there was something that, there was some action that you guys said, we're gonna come back to that.
It was the public
Who's
forums.
Karen?
Okay,
Yeah.
All right, never mind, so take care. Yeah. Who did I got in row? That's group 2.
Okay. So we have tasking on public forums draft. We have a task of early draft local interface with the larger group. We have a task on the financials with Bob, just, what are the questions? What do we need to bring back to the full study committee? We have social media, IT. FAQs, we're gonna do some work with that, get that going, and articles, drafting short articles connected to the FAQs. Am I forgetting any other tasks that we said, yes, we're gonna do that before the next meeting? Mike's gonna help us with modeling,
You said articles, I was assuming the
Oh.
articles to bring it, you mean newspaper articles?
newspaper.
Okay, op-eds, okay, gotcha.
Information.
Information pieces, FAQs, we'll call them FAQs.
Collateral.
Oh, Mark Miller.
Okay, anything else before we adjourn?
So what are you talking about? Yeah, those words you spelled out.
Just our charging our tasks. Anything else? Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Colin.
No, no, that's very helpful.
One line.
Karen.